I had a certain responsibility to investors and to my family and to these projects and to these employees. And I couldn't, it wasn't possible for me at the time to parachute out. I guess if the disease had progressed to a point where, I really needed to, and I was physically dependent on drugs and alcohol to a point where I needed a detox and I needed, a 30-day residential, I'm sure, like most of us, we find the resources to meet us, to meet those demands. For me, the disease hadn't progressed to that point, and I wanted to find a way to really integrate this life that I was going to lead into the life that I had. So I didn't want to stop building shopping centers. I didn't want to abandon my partners. I didn't want to abandon my employees. What was I going to do? So I built like a good executive and a good professional. I built a little network around me. I got a great therapist. I went to group therapy. I started flying private so I could get to meetings every day. I mean, I did whatever I needed to do to integrate my life into recovery the best way I could. But there was no one, I was building the roadmap. And so I said, I built this roadmap. I figured this out on my own. And it was one of the things that I think prevented me initially from getting help was how difficult the road to getting help seemed. So many options, so many things, so many concerns. I said, let me take that path and present it to you. I've done it. I've been you. There's nothing you can tell me about your busy executive, professional, successful life that I haven't lived or made excuses around. So if you want to change, I've done it. This is how I did it. And if you want to do it, I can show you how. Let me take the guesswork out of it. I guess kind of in that old success leaves.
Hello and welcome to another exclusive interview by Recovery Today Magazine at recoverytodaymagazine.com, where first and foremost, we're a magazine of hope. Whether you're considering addiction recovery for yourself or a loved one, maybe you're active in recovery a little while or a long, long time, you're going to find all kinds of topics related to addiction, recovery, and really living a happy, successful, and sober life at Recovery Today. My name is Rob Hanley. I'm the editor-in-chief of Recovery Today. And as usual, I've got another awesome guest, a great, great friend of mine, somebody that lifts me up and inspires me every single time I ever talk to him. He's spent 25 years as an active real estate developer and investor in California and has been sober since 2008. Since then, he's turned his attention and resources to helping carry a message of recovery and healing to sufferers nationwide, and he founded Archway House a few years ago, which is an executive and professionals supportive living home in Thousand Oaks, California. He's dedicated his life to helping others get on the road to recovery, and he's passionate about sharing his comprehensive, integrated philosophy of sobriety and life with other professionals and executives in hopes of helping them live a life that they always wanted to live. My friend, Charlie Smith, thanks for jumping on.
Oh, Rob, man, it's so good to see you. I mean, we get to talk on the phone, now and again, and to actually see it is so great. And I can't thank you enough for having me on and for our friendship.
Yeah, what a cool thing. That is so Charlie that you would say that you would open up like that too. And truly, when we talk, I'm really uplifted, man. I the feeling is the love affair is very, very mutual. We talked about a couple of weeks ago, you texted me and then you gave me a call saying, I'm just going to call and just talking, 15 or 20 minutes and kind of connecting authentically. It lifts me. You're such a wealth of information. And what you were doing though, with Archway House and some of the things that you were describing, I was like, we need to do a segment and feature you overall in the magazine. And so, thanks for coming on, man. But I guess quickly, I know we're a little bit pressed for time, so I'm going to kind of go a little faster pace than I usually go. But tell everybody a little bit about your story and let's give some context for it. And then we'll kind of start to land into a sober living home for executives and professionals, which is quite different from what a lot of people's preconception would be of what a sober home or a sober living home is. You're knocking down a couple of $100,000 a year. You're, probably not too happy about, what that might look like without Archway House. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. It means a lot to me. Yeah, my journey was, one of an appearance of success and a struggle with a lot of internal pain. As 85 or 90% of sufferers from substance abuse, I was a victim of violent childhood trauma. I had a violent upbringing at the hands of a dad who at the age of 19, had a .45 caliber pistol leveled at my head. I had learned a couple of skills growing up to kind of manage and numb the pain of that existence. One was I started drinking at the age of 12. And then there were two things that were acceptable to my dad. He was a college professor. So two things acceptable to him for me to be out of my house were either work or school. So I developed a bit of a work ethic, not because I really had these strong desires to become successful, but I just wanted to stay out of the house that I was living in. And so I kind of used both of those to fuel, my success. And so I went to college, and I started in banking back in New York in the early 90s, worked myself through a couple of recessions working on distressed assets, which led me to partnering up with some guys and buying distressed assets, but all the while still using both of those kind of avoidance techniques that I had learned. So I had the appearance of success. I like to say when I speak to people that I could pass the bank account test, I could pass the family test, I could pass the career test, but I couldn't pass the look in the mirror test because I kind of was still living in the shadows and living a very incongruent life. So to the outside, like a lot of professionals and executives, it looked like a guy who had it all together. On the inside, I was crumbling, not just inside, but also, living this double life and finding the shadows to kind of, deal with my disease. So yeah, I joined a country club, but I hang out with guys that did coke in the bathroom, or stayed up playing cards all night and didn't go home. It was that kind of existence where one part of it looked really good, but really what the story was not so good. And so in 2008, all of those things, we're good until we're not, as I know a lot of the people you featured have undisclosed to you, and we're good until we're not. And so that runway all crashed. When you have those two dials out of alignment, what I wanted you to believe about me and the way I was behaving, ultimately everybody drives off the cliff. And for me, I crashed the car, to a point where, again, didn't lose everything. I'd lost myself, but I had still managed to, carve together a successful career. And what did recovery look like to me? And recovery to me looked like changing my beliefs and changing my behaviors. So I did that. And about 3 years ago, I decided that there was really a need to provide an integrated approach to recovery to other people that were struggling in that disease and that professional and corporate world like I was. And when I looked around, Rob, I just didn't see a model for supportive living that spoke to me or that was conducive to the kind of things that people like I needed. Where can I help? I can help mostly where I can identify. And so that's what I decided to do. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes complete sense. And it's funny as we're kind of talking about this. Obviously, we like each other. We connected with each other the way that we did because we really shared the same heart and passion and love for people, for everybody. And we're a cheerleader for everybody. We both share like the whole idea of the American dream, man. Like you can do anything, and yesterday doesn't dictate tomorrow, and all of these kind of golden nuggets that we live by. But the interesting thing is, and the reality is, we have some parameters that are around in terms of how to serve people the best. And the truth is that in the society that we're on, and from the kind of the preconceptions that we have, if you're somebody that's a six-figure, multiple six-figure, or a seven-figure earner, and you've got all of the thinking about you and the beliefs about you that you have, it's not going to mix putting you in a halfway house, if you will. We don't call it that, but that's what the people say, a halfway house, with a guy that's a checker at Walmart. We love the guy that's a checker at Walmart. Nobody is better than anybody else, but it's not that guy that's the executive is not going to fare well in that environment, because he's going to be thinking, we drop a couple of F-bombs here. He's going to be thinking, what the fuck, man? This is not for me. And they need to be in some kind of an environment where they're, around other spotted leopards, man, where they're, everybody needs to be at least somewhere where you don't want to be sitting in the meeting and going, that guy's fucked up. That's not me. What are your thoughts kind of from there, the whole idea of like, that's not me, and maybe the impetus to create something that was going to be for me?
Yeah, here's the way I look at that. So I think there's two parts to it. One, I think people really do better when they have a shared experience. There's this concept of identification as human beings, we seek connection, with other human beings. And when we have that common shared experience of life, when I look at the group of people that I can try and help, they have something around this shared experience and this shared identity. I think everybody has got a recovery story, and how we help those. It's like, I was just watching, it'll sound funny, but I was just watching a documentary called In Search of Greatness, and Red Auerbach was being interviewed. Red Auerbach was the coach of the Boston Celtics, multiple NBA championship winner. And he talked about how he had to coach every player different. He could not coach every player the same way. And he was very mindful of what each player's strengths and weaknesses were. And you can tune some guy up and he's get motivated, and the other guy you tune up and he crawls into a shell. And I guess for me, it's a little bit like, when you've got a group of failure to launch kids or young adults, who are struggling at a certain point in their life, and they're doing resume building, and their life needs structure because they've never had any. And then you've got an executive and a professional who, we've got these situations when we get to a certain point in life. We've got family, we've got children, we have a wife who may or may not want us in her life. We may be separated or divorced. That shared experience, being together with other men, going through those kinds of things, it's important from a self-respect standpoint and from a shared experience standpoint to be able to identify with other people, both 100%. The problem and the solution. So it's not so much about anything other than putting a like-minded group of people together and give them the resources that they specifically need. They don't need resume building. They don't need to make their bed. They don't need, they need a certain level of humility, right? Let's face it, it's our ego that, as executives and professionals, we want to treat this disease with ego and we can't. So they need a certain amount of humility, but it doesn't come from stripping them of their dignity. I like to say that what I've created is something that gives you the support you need and the respect you deserve.
So you were already at that level when reading your bio, you're a real estate investor, you're a business guy. Anybody that spends more than 30 seconds talking with you knows that you're educated, intelligent, articulate, all of the things. And then the leadership nuggets just pour out of you, which I know a lot of that is actually post-recovery, but I'm certain that much of that is steeped into your background that took you to where you were. So what was your experience though? Like, was this a lot born out of, holy crap, I wish there was something like this when I was recovered? Like you were knocking down, making a lot of money and had all the trappings of success. What was your experience with what you've created here in contrast?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It was a lot of, and rightly so, right? We seem to solve problems that were created out of our own lives. And that's what I was trying to do. So when I got sober in 2008, I had an active commercial real estate development business. I had probably 35 employees. I had a very supportive partner who gave me the runway I needed to figure this out. But what did figure this out mean? It didn't mean I had the ability to go away somewhere. I had to figure out a way to, keep these projects going. I had a certain responsibility to investors and to my family and to these projects and to these employees. And I couldn't, it wasn't possible for me at the time to parachute out. I guess if the disease had progressed to a point where, I really needed to, and I was physically dependent on drugs and alcohol to a point where I needed a detox and I needed, a 30-day residential, I'm sure, like most of us, we find the resources to meet us, to meet those demands. For me, the disease hadn't progressed to that point, and I wanted to find a way to really integrate this life that I was going to lead into the life that I had. So I didn't want to stop building shopping centers. I didn't want to abandon my partners. I didn't want to abandon my employees. What was I going to do? So I built like a good executive and a good professional. I built a little network around me. I got a great therapist. I went to group therapy. I started flying private so I could get to meetings every day. I did whatever I needed to do to integrate my life into recovery the best way I could. But there was no one, I was building the roadmap. And so I said, I built this roadmap. I figured this out on my own. And it was one of the things that I think prevented me initially from getting help was how difficult the road to getting help seemed. So many options, so many things, so many concerns. I said, let me take that path and present it to you. I've done it. I've been you. There's nothing you can tell me about your busy executive, professional, successful life that I haven't lived or made excuses around. So if you want to change, I've done it. This is how I did it. And if you want to do it, I can show you how. Let me take the guesswork out of it. I guess kind of in that old success leaves clues mantra. It's like, I've been doing this for 13 years. I know how I did it. And if you want what I have, I can show you what I did. And that's kind of how it came about.
Are you, if you could wave a magic wand and not have the car crash, as figuratively speaking, or even have the disease progress, I guess part of the really what I'm getting around is authentically, truly, are you grateful that that you've, I mean, obviously your life is very different now than it was before. Sounds like from the outside looking in, it's pretty badass life, man, especially if you're flying private. I don't know very many people that do things like fly private or develop commercial real estate. That sounds badass, but would you trade what you have now for what could have or might have been had that thing not come to a close?
I know I wouldn't trade the life I have today for anything.
It's really kind of a dumb question because I don't know anybody that ever says, yeah, I would, but
well, I mean, look, it's not a dumb question. It's like, I have to look at the fact that I honestly don't think I'd be here. I was just down in San Diego with Prince Daniels Jr., who was a running back in the NFL and a really incredible mental performance expert, mindfulness expert, meditation expert. We talked about how difficult it was for me to spend time with me. I was existing, Rob. I didn't know myself. I didn't like myself. Wasn't living an intentional life. And so there was no continuation of that life. That life was going to either end up with me in the ground or alone or in jail. I don't have any misconceptions about where I was headed. And so, and I've lost, a lot of those things I no longer need or enjoy. I have a very simple existence today, but I'm still very productive, and still very adventurous, and I'm still very enthusiastic about my new endeavors. All the things that I'm doing now. I still have a few legacy projects, but I've started a new speaking, coaching, and training business. I train companies on optimism and resiliency. I coach individuals. I speak nationally as a public speaker. I mean, all these things I never thought I would be doing are born out of this, gift that I've been given, which is just a bunch of self-awareness and reflection.
Yeah, that's pretty extraordinary. Before I go into so many different avenues that I want to adequately give you an opportunity to kind of describe, it sounds a little commercial or whatever, but tell us a little bit about, there's somebody that's thinking, shit, I'm like that guy, or my brother-in-law is, or my such and such, he's a freaking, I could never get him into rehab because so tell us a little bit about about your place. And, speaking, I guess, to whoever like an executive person is, that's, another Charlie Smith, but it's 2021.
Thank you for that question. So really, Archway House is 6 private rooms. The first thing I decided was that I was not going to take advantage of density to drive profit. Most of the guys, including myself, I haven't had a roommate since, a few years after college. It's not the way I live. Most of the guys that I treat are used to living in their own room with their wife, their girlfriend, their significant other. And so 6 private rooms. We haven't, our founding principles are just simply integration. So what I'm here to do is help you integrate recovery, a life of recovery, into your busy, active, professional, familiar, social life. And so integration is the first principle. So we don't take your keys, we don't take your laptop, we don't take your cell phone. Our house is for people that have an active life and are looking to integrate recovery into that life. Many of them come from a detox or treatment center after 30 days. They've kind of got that initial runway. They're not ready to live on their own, or they're coming to us after detox, and they're ready to now figure out how to do this. So it's integration, it's accountability. So I like to look at what your goals are. Look at all of the goals. Do you have goals of reuniting with your family, your loved ones, your wife, repairing relationships with children? What have you been neglecting from a business and a professional standpoint? We all look a certain way, but there's lots of kind of baggage that we come into recovery with. And so how do we start slowly unpacking that for you so that it's not overwhelming? How do we build recovery habits into your life? And then it's the support piece. So it's integration, accountability, and support. Those are really the 3 things we do. We've got an executive director of recovery services. And then we've got layers on top of that. So depending on what your needs are, we've got some of the top professionals in the country available as resources. So George Mumford is part of our executive recovery program. If you want performance management help, we've got Dave Meltzer, who runs Sports One Marketing with Warren Moon, as a national business coach, who's part of our executive recovery program. Mike Diamond is part of our executive recovery program. So we've got these resources, in addition to Mike Conroy, who's a certified drug and alcohol counselor, who gets in on the ground floor and helps you foundationally rebuild your life. So it's recovery foundation. What are the things you need to do different than you were, and how do we get you to build those into the things you do every day? How do we get you to get back to your commitments, to your work, and to your family? And we do this gradually over time. And really the idea, Rob, is simply when you leave Archway House, when you leave our program, that you've done it all. There's no shock to the system. We take guys to ball games. We go out to dinner at restaurants. You go to business conferences and stay sober. Your deals close and you stay sober. Your deals don't close and you stay sober. Your director of sales resigns and you stay sober. So it's really, let them, I call us the ultimate petri dish of recovery. It's like, go through all those challenges you've had and let us help you stay sober doing it. That's Archway House at its basic level.
One of the things that sounds badass, it really, really does. And I like actually the last kind of landing point of, your sales manager quits, you're sober. The deal closes, you're sober. The deal doesn't close, you're sober. And I think really ultimately what we're looking for is we're looking for peace. We're not really looking, I don't think, for happiness. You might say we're looking for fulfillment. And, for sure, life is easier if you got money and people to tell what to do, and you've got, all of the trappings that most people would say success. I think anybody would be, crazy to say, well, life's not easier that way. It really is easier that way. But I think that there lacks peace. And there's, regardless of who you are, you have this hole inside of you that you have to fill. It's this void, probably growing and growing and growing in you. So I think that that's really, really cool. The whole idea of being able to manage all of the things that you're doing, but now learn how to do it and actually have peace about it. That's kind of what I'm picking up. My question for you though is, I nailed it. Okay, good. I kind of thought that was what I kind of thought that's what it is. So the thing that's interesting about you in particular, as I said, anybody that talked to you for 30 seconds or see you is you're a guy that's like on point. Firstly, before you got, and you're very empathetic and compassionate and generous, by the way, I will say, when we first met, we both have a love for personal development. You were telling me about a great book by Russell Wilson's mental coach. And you freaking put it in the mail to me, man. Like it was like, and it wasn't like you put it in the mail. It was like the next day. So you're somebody that's always impressed me quite a bit. You live kind of life at this high level. Before recovery, were you an asshole? Because you can be an asshole and be really on point with stuff and just be an asshole to everybody. Were you compassionate the same way? Or where does that come from, where you are now, this kind of compassionate, generous, at peace type of person?
Yeah, that's an insightful question. The answer is, like most, I have varied traits. I spent a lot of time not being a very good friend, not being a very good leader. I led out of fear. My own insecurity led me to cope in other ways. And so, a lot of what I've learned has come from my failings, and you can either learn from your failings, change and adapt and have a new quarter, or you can continue down that path, to use a football analogy, and just keep throwing interceptions until you get let go. Fortunately for me, I've had some influential people in my life that have shown me a different way to live, but it really does come out of a lot of failings as a human being. And I think that's one of the reasons why I have so much empathy and so much compassion for the human condition, is because it's born out of my own fallibility. I couldn't accept my fallibility before. I couldn't accept my faults before. And so I had a lot of narratives and a lot of dialogue, around who I wasn't. And no one ever taught me, well, who do you want to be and how do you get there? And so to answer your question, I think I've always had a sensitive, compassionate heart, but a lot of black tar figuratively got layered on top of it that darkened my soul. And as my soul got darkened, I became really less of the person I wanted to be. I mean, I was the guy literally that was about to be uninvited on our annual golf trip, because of my attitude and because of my anger and my outbursts and my dishonesty.
That's what I was getting at. Anger, probably. Yep. That's probably.
Yeah, anger is a secondary emotion to fear and insecurity. And so I lived a lot of fear and insecurity. And the only way I could mask it was through, uncontained anger. And I think I hurt many people as a result of that. And, like most of us, as I said, we've got these two components, right? I mean, I've got this trauma that led to a low self-esteem, and then I've got a shame-based disease that had me, behaving in immoral ways. And so really helping people overcome, and realizing that doesn't define them, and what defines them is how they decide to live next. And so if I can slowly just start living differently, slowly I start to build the true nature of my character. And if I do that long enough, then I start to like myself. And really what you described, that piece you described, really comes from having those two dials in alignment. Who I am today is what you see is what you get. How I live my life. Have I made a ton of mistakes? Absolutely. Do I continue to make subtle mistakes throughout my life? Of course I do.
Sure.
Do I have fear? I do. It's not the emotions or the feelings that I'm so subjective to today. It's how I deal with them. And that to me is really the whole thing. It's like when Covey wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, he talks about living a principled life. There's a concept in the 12 steps that says practice these principles in all your affairs. When you make principles and values the hub of your spoke and you apply them in all aspects of your life, it tends to take the guesswork out of it. You tend to accept yourself more, and you tend to find what you describe, which is really that ability to put my head on my pillow at the end of the night, knowing I did the absolute best I could, and it's true.
What's so funny is, who popped into my mind as you were just throwing out nugget after nugget after nugget is our mutual friend that introduced us, Mike Diamond. And to quote our friend Mike Diamond, he'd say, so good, so good. That's so, so good. I know that we're pressed for time, but I wanted to give an adequate landing. So I'm going to weave a couple of questions in here because this is a little bit more about who it is that you are. And you're a high performer. So you're, even here, generally I'm not so pressed for time and whatnot. But you have to get to a meeting in a few minutes. So I'm going to bring it in for a landing on these questions. Is number one, what is it that drives you? How do you stay motivated to be on point like you are, to not just show up, but to show up and be ready and on point and pack all of these kind of things. And the other bigger thing is, I really want to know who you are in terms of the big major question I love to ask everybody is why are we here? What is your purpose here? And why are we here? That's kind of my final bigger questions to ask you.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, here's the first part is, and I think there's several maybe actors and athletes that have coined this phrase, which I think is what you're seeing with me, which is when you're always ready, you don't have to get ready. You just stay ready. And for me,
I love that.
I've got this, when you start to build habits form you. And so I've developed this routine of how I live my life. And it really is an energy source that I can't describe to you. It's not woo-woo, it's not levitation. It's really about what you seek, you find. If you hunt the good things, you find the good things, and I spent a lot of my life, looking for the bad, and I found the bad, and it's a de-energizing exercise. And so, what fuels me and motivates me today is the absolute challenge that I give myself every day to be the best I can be and to give a piece of me to everybody that I interact with, the very best of me. I don't want anybody, every time I speak, I leave a little bit of my soul with Rob Hanley and Recovery Today magazine, because I want you to have a little of my soul, because I've worked hard for this soul, and the power of the universe, that I believe in, that I've tapped into, is what serves me. And so this is my authentic self. I don't have to turn it on and off. I don't have to, if you hit record, and we have had conversations, this, that if we weren't recording right now, this is who you get. I mean, this is,
oh yeah,
this is, essentially, this essence of a soul that I've always wanted to be. I just never took the time to get to know myself, right? I mean, I just started this platform, and I'll share with you, called My Life, My Pen, which is when you write the story of your life, don't ever let anyone else hold the pen. And I never knew what to write with the pen. And so now I've started to get to know myself. And when you get to know yourself, you get to be yourself. And that's, if I could describe this any more simply, it would be hard, but just to say, I know myself. And when you know yourself, it's much easier to be yourself. I never took time to get to know myself. And because of that, I didn't like myself. So I always had to be something else. I was the ultimate chameleon. I learned from a very young age to show you who I thought you wanted to be. And because I didn't really know myself, it was easy for me to put on a bunch of different faces. And so today I'm really just served by my own true self. I don't know how else to say it.
I absolutely love, so do people get in contact with you? I love My Life, My Pen. I'm sad that I couldn't go into that in more detail that it actually needs, it's beyond badass. It's so good. So is that where people get in touch with you? How do people get back to you and learn more? And you can see, this is why I said every time I talk to this guy, I'm completely next level, uplifted.
And the feeling is actually mutual, because what I get out of this relationship, what I get out of this friendship, is the ability to be me and be appreciated for being me. And you've done a lot to fill this tank up, so thank you.
Yeah.
For allowing me to be me and to be.
You're extraordinary, dude. You're extraordinary. You're one of so many people. Actually, I will tell you this on recording. When I think of decisions to make, I have a very short list, a couple of people. Our friend Mike Diamond is one. Okay. I've got my brother-in-law who's badass, my brother, and you're one of the people. I honestly think, what would Charlie do? I really do. And so you're freaking extraordinary, dude. You're extraordinary.
Yeah, I'm available. So charlie@archwayhouse.com is my email address. On Instagram, you can follow me or message me at Charlie Smith Speaks. I do have at My Life, My Pen. We just launched that, so I've just got the page up. But really, charlie@archwayhouse.com, or at Charlie Smith Speaks on Instagram, and Charlie Smith on Facebook. My cell phone number is 805-657-8300. And if you need me, you may call that cell phone number. I don't have a burner. It's sitting right here. Light it up. I will pick up the phone. I am here to help.
So good. Thank you, my friend. This has been another cool, short, fun, awesome interview with my friend Charlie Smith, Recovery Today magazine, and that is a wrap.